asking the questions mainstream journalists will never ask. This is your Richie Allen Show on richieallen.co.uk, Fab Radio 2 in Manchester, and triggerwarning.tv.
There are a few things I'd like to chat about from today's headlines. Did you see the Daily Mail today? You don't read the Daily Mail. I don't blame you. A lot of people picked up on a story. The Mail ran a story, Mail Online, and published a video of police in Windsor basically taking the belongings of homeless people, putting them in bags and telling them their belongings will be returned to them after the royal wedding this Saturday. Police have been clearing away possessions, and it's been shown in a video obtained by Mail Online. I posted a link to this on Twitter. I haven't put a lot of things on Twitter today, so if you go to my Twitter, you'll see the story and the video. They're sweeping the area clean of people who are down on their luck. Moving on, rough sleepers. The video shows officers asking two homeless men who had basically been staying or sleeping rough outside a bank opposite Windsor Castle. The police told them to pack up their items, put them in see-through bags. Those were sealed and were taken away in a police van. They'll be kept in storage until Monday. What are the men going to sleep on in the meantime? I don't know. This is the level of psychopathy in this upside-down lunatic asylum that we live in, this paradigm. Madness. There's also a woman who was seen clutching a blue sleeping bag. She was talking to the police at first. She got a bit irate and she ran away clutching her meagre possessions. What sort of sick bastard would take those instructions from his or her sergeant or superintendent? Wouldn't you just tell them to fuck off, wouldn't you? I want you today, Richie, to go into Windsor and take the bare possessions, all they have, the little they have from them, and tell them you'll give them back to them on Monday. No, I won't, Sergeant. I won't do that. You can sanction me, you can suspend me, you can discipline me if you want, but that I'm not going to do. I draw the line at that. Madness. Madness. 7 minutes past the hour. For the third time, by the way, in just over 10 years, the UK government has run into difficulty with the East Coast Main Line rail franchise. You know that everything in this country has been privatised by one government or another. The railways are gone. As the Labour Party says, well, if we get into power, we'll take the railways back, we'll renationalise them. Yeah, more on that in a minute. But the East Coast Main Line rail franchise is in trouble. So the Transport Secretary, Chris Grayling, has said today it will be put in the hands of a public-private partnership at least until 2020. The London to Edinburgh line had been run by a joint venture between Stagecoach and Virgin since 2015. How did they get it? Well, they agreed to give £3.3 billion to the government for the rights to run the line, and they would pay that money in instalments over the course of the franchise. But they told a lot of porcupines when they made their bid it was unrealistic and they've gotten into serious trouble. Right? They are 3 years into their 8-year franchise, and Virgin and Stagecoach have made it clear the arrangement is unsustainable, that they're not making enough money. So the government said basically today the firms were over-optimistic about an expected increase in passenger numbers when they made the bid. Over-optimistic is another way of saying they lied through their teeth. They underbid, presumably thinking, well, further down the line, we'll get a bailout anyway. No matter what happens, we won't lose out. That's true, by the way. The firms, Richard Branson of Virgin in particular, blamed the government and blamed a delayed upgrade of tracks for their inability to make the deal work. Right. Branson, of course, is a serial bullshitter. They lied to secure the bid, Virgin and Stagecoach. Not that the government gave a shite that they lied. So it's the third time a franchise has run into trouble on this East Coast line. After GNER and then later on National Express ran it, they screwed it up. And in 2009, the Labour government took it back into public ownership. And there it remained until 2015, when the Olympic Committee for Privatising, the Tories, sold it again. Guess what, dear listener? In the time it was in public ownership between 2009 and 2015, run not for profit, it did really well. More on that in a minute. It really did really well. Before that, though, have a listen to Andy MacDonald. Now, he's the Labour MP. He's the Shadow Transport Secretary. And you will hear him addressing the Transport Secretary, Chris Grayling, today. This is Andy MacDonald.
In the last year, the Transport Secretary gifted Virgin Stagecoach a £2 billion bailout after they failed on the East Coast Main Line, at the same time as awarding these same companies a lucrative contract extension on the West Coast. And he has the audacity to come to that dispatch box and say it's not reasonable to remove or place conditions on their passport. Absolutely ludicrous.
Fraud, anybody? Fraud? Fraud, anybody? Should the fraud squad be contacted? Because Grayling and his criminal Prime Minister friend didn't just learn yesterday that Virgin and Stagecoach have screwed up the franchise, and yet they not only bailed them out, they also offered them an extension on the West Coast franchise. Who does that? Criminals do that, is who. More from Andy MacDonald, the Shadow Transport Secretary.
3 times in under a decade, private companies have failed on the East Coast. Its only successful period was from 2009 to 2015 under public ownership, when £1 billion was returned to the Treasury. It was the best performing operator on the network before being cynically reprivatised on the eve of the 2015 general election. Then the Secretary of State for Transport said, "I believe Stagecoach and Virgin will not only deliver for customers, but also for the British taxpayer." What nonsense.
Yep, what nonsense. It was the best performing on the network, generating £1 billion for the Treasury, owned by the public, a public asset. Sleaze, corruption, filth, flarn filth. Filth, flarn filth, brothers. Greasy bastards, every one of them. Every politician who walks that cesspit in Westminster, that hive of scum and villainy, is owned by private interests. Surely it is treason to hand over a brilliantly performing public asset to a corporation. Surely that is treachery. It must be treason. What did Chris Grayling, the Transport Secretary, say in response to MacDonald? Well, it pains me. It pains me to say it. But Grayling shot down Jeremy Corbyn's mate by reminding him that under Labour plans to stay in the customs union, they'll not be allowed nationalise a damn thing.
He talks about nationalisation. Let's deal with this issue head on. His version of this is a party that has spent the last few months desperately trying to take us back into the ambit of the European Union. Let me explain to him very simply. His policy on rail nationalisation is illegal under European law, Union law. Exactly. So it's all well and good them arguing, well, we should stay in the single market, we should have a second referendum and the rest. His version of nationalisation is not legal under European law. So why would we take him seriously when he talks about this?
See, that's true. Despise Grayling and his type and his ilk as I do, I've got to be honest. Despise the mob on the other side of the house just as much. They're all serial liars, con men, and most of them are millionaires. And this is why I despise Jeremy Corbyn. He's given false hope to people who need to face reality. Politics is the most potent weapon of the cabal. You cannot change anything through it. Corbyn is, on the one hand, anti-European Union, anti-globalisation, anti-privatisation. But he's been gotten to. Now he wants to stay in Europe via the back door. So forget nationalisation now. Forget a real opposition to Zionist control of UK politics now. I've been saying it for years. When he was elected leader of the Labour Party, I laughed in the face of those who said, this is a great thing, this is a great man. I told you he would never bring change. Staying in the customs union or a fitted up, bespoke customs union arrangement means that plans to take back into public ownership the railways or anything else will not happen. Never going to happen anyway. 15 minutes past the hour. Here's a bizarre story for you. Talk about bizarre story. There is murders in Canada. Murders. The public are up in arms. The news media is full of stories about ISIS jihadists who have come back to Canada, who have bragged about murder, but are walking around Canada free as a bird. And this is true, right? Apparently, a self-confessed Islamic State executioner took part in a New York Times podcast show called Caliphate and acknowledged that he had taken part in executions. He's now walking around, and the Canadian government is saying that there's not enough evidence to take him into custody and to find out who this guy is. Here's RT with the story.
In Canada, anger continues to build concerning the government's lack of action over a self-confessed Islamic State executioner after he lied to immigration services to get back into the country. He revealed it openly on a New York Times podcast show called Caliphate. The former ISIL fighter, who goes by the name of Abu Huzaifa, left Canada 4 years ago when he was just 17 and told his parents he was flying to Turkey. But 5 months after joining the terror group in Syria, he decided that he wanted to return to Toronto, following what he originally said was his second execution, though Huzaifa has now retracted those comments, saying he has not killed anyone. Well, officials hope the man had said enough to incriminate himself on the New York Times podcast series, where he gave detailed accounts of executing people. But that may not be enough to charge him, according to documents obtained by a Canadian news network. Canada's Prime Minister has been fending off criticism about the case. And when Justin Trudeau was asked about terrorist returnees, he seemingly shifted the blame to attack Conservatives in the country instead.
When is the Prime Minister going to stop allowing these bloodthirsty terrorists to walk on our streets, but throw them in jail instead?
Mr. Speaker, once again we see the Conservatives trying to drum up fear is a way of political attack.
When will the Prime Minister finally imprison ISIS terrorists instead of allowing them to use Canada?
The right honourable Prime Minister. Once again, we saw this approach in the last election by the previous government. It doesn't work to try and scare and divide Canadians.
Ah, the madness of that. And if you are a Canadian, and we don't do fear porn, and we acknowledge that much, nay, nearly all of the terrorism is sponsored, is funded by our governments and by our intelligence agencies, before I say any more. However, this guy is out there, right? And if the Canadians are thinking, on the one hand, well, we can trust that our intelligence agencies are keeping an eye on this guy in case he does anything, I've got 2 words for you. Salman Abedi. Manchester, May 22nd, 2017. That's more than 2 words. Madness. To Palestine then, it's been, things have quietened down, which is a good thing. People are being buried. Operations are taking place to try and save limbs. Thousands of people injured, of course. The Israeli Defence Forces firing on people yesterday, Nakba Day. Not so much yesterday, but the day before, of course, when the embassy was opened in Jerusalem. Dreadful situation there. We'll talk to Robert Inlakesh about that in about 10 minutes' time. Diana Bhutto is a former legal advisor to Mahmoud Abbas. She was on CNN last night and had this to say about what has been going on in Palestine, in Gaza, in the last few days.
This is exactly what we expected, which is the U.S. and the Israelis toe-in-toe blaming victims. At every junction, Israel has had an opportunity whether to put down its snipers or to not put down its snipers, and it has deliberately chosen to kill Palestinians, including 8 children just yesterday alone, including a disabled man, all because it has the ability to do so and because nobody is stopping it. I would have expected that the United States would be second-guessing now its decision to move the embassy to Jerusalem because that is illegal. Israel. And instead, what it has done, it is clamped down alongside with Israel and saying that that Israel has the ability and, in fact, has the right to kill Palestinians when it does not. This is a clear violation of international law, and I hope that the world is going to step up and start sanctioning Israel.
Right. Well, there's obviously different views about whether it's a violation of international law, whether the rules of engagement have been actually broken. Let me ask you this. What is actually the declared goal of the March of Return on the part of Hamas?
It's not a declared goal of the part of Hamas. It's on the part of Palestinians who are living in Gaza and throughout.
But
throughout
Hamas
Palestine,
organizes the Gazans. Hamas organizes the protesters, and you know that.
Which is one simple goal. Palestinians want to return. They haven't been allowed to return to their homes for 70 years because of the fact that they're simply not Jewish. I want to get back, however, to the issue of rules of engagement.
No, hold on. I want to continue with my question. Hold on. Let me just say, excuse me, Diana. Hold on one second.
We're not allowed to simply shoot. Excuse me, I cannot hear you. We're not allowed to simply shoot people because they're standing in a protest. There has to be a clear line of threat. Not a single Israeli has been injured in this whatsoever. And so what Israel's doing is simply gunning people down.
Okay.
Yeah, gunning people down. That's it. Very interesting stuff, that. Sanction Israel, she said. It's something that's been mentioned on this program time and time again. It ain't going to happen. As long as the US is there to veto any action by the United Nations, it ain't going to happen. You can sanction them your own way. And the way to do that is to, in your own tiny way, is to disassociate yourself from the state of Israel. Don't buy its goods. Don't travel there. Don't support artists or personalities or celebrities who go there. If enough people do that, it hurts. It must hurt because they're trying to make it illegal, aren't they, in countries around the world.